And we are live, and this is our third live stream from Inclusion in Leadership. This is our first one, though, under the new series, Inclusion Unscripted. And we're going to talk today about representation, the core issue, the really important issue of representation. Nigel, our fourth partner, can't be here, but we have an amazing guest today. Elizabeth, tell us who our guest is.
Yes, thank you, Simon. Welcome, everybody. I am so proud to introduce one of my colleagues and a dear friend. We have known each other since we were both in Fortune 100 companies. It's Armando Martín. He has a 25-year record of building diverse, equitable, and inclusive teams. I met him when he was in Western Union. I was in the telecom industry. And then from there, he went and co-founded, and actually ran an incredible ad agency and marketing agency, multicultural, in Detroit, Michigan, in the United States. And then since then, he continues being an entrepreneur and also sits on several boards. So Armando, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Gracias. It's great to be here with everybody.
Great. Well, let's dive in, Armando. Let's go ahead and dive in. My first, as Simon said, we're going to be talking about representation. And with all the experience you've had of being in corporate America, being an entrepreneur, being on boards, my first question to you is, today's leaders, how can they place, why is it so important for them to place such a strong focus on having representation across all their management ranks?
Well, thank you for that. That makes that's an assumption that, first of all, that they believe in it, and to define that equity, the diversity and equity and inclusion, which sometimes is a distraction for us to get us off topic. One of the other things that we'll talk about is what can they do, and that's to remove that DEI Chief Diversity Officer from underneath the HR and to have a direct report to the CEO. So for me to define what equity is, or maybe even equality is, and that implies equal pay, equal compensation. For me, the definition is easy within an organization, which is dollars. People pay you what they think of you. And so while we think about diversity, and we now have a chief diversity officer who many times has no direct reports, or she doesn't have any budget to work with, and we set ourselves up for failure. We don't put a face on who's responsible for this disservice at many of our organizations. We just call it systematic. So there's no responsibility to anybody. And maybe in all fairness, this has been going on for before we were even in the workplace. This systematic, what happened with our organizations is they created an inequality. So without me just blaming, it was the white guy in the corner office 70 years ago. Let me just say that these organizations were the construct for racial inequality or inequity. But to me, it's inequality because we're not compensated in the same way. And what I'm talking about is generational wealth. Here in the local newspaper, we listed the top 20 earners in a given year just a couple of years ago. The top earner was $65 million that year. Generational wealth. The other 19 that followed, as I'm apt to do, I started saying, who's Black, who's Asian, who's Hispanic? And it looked like it was a group entirely made up of white folks. So I wrote an article that said, hey, congratulations. We salute you. We honor that you're hardworking, that you're persistent, that you're determined, that you had education and these characteristics. And I said, but hang on, those are the same characteristics we have. What is keeping us from those stock grants? And that generational wealth. So first of all, it's important for the organization to take a hard look at itself and define what equality is, and not always equity, because equity doesn't get you to stock grants that are millions of dollars in generational wealth. It's equality that gets you there. And there's something in our system that has kept us in these organizations by and large, because any of us can get online and look at our favorite company and just take a look at the executive committee or the board of directors, and it still is not anywhere near the reflection of a minority majority that's 18 years away, where America will hit that threshold, that milestone of becoming a minority majority country. So I think, just to wrap that up, I think that's where we start of why it's important. America is changing, and we look irrelevant or backwards if our company doesn't reflect America. And beyond that, there's the bottom line that comes with having a company that is diverse. And so I would just say that that representation is important, but it's hard to walk the talk and to talk equity if you're not being equitable or equal.
That amazing message. Thank you for saying that. So I have one more question. And that is, you mentioned one of the key things that a leader can do is whatever they have the chief diversity officer to have a budget for that individual, to have direct reports for that individual, and that individual goes into operations, doesn't go into human resources. What else can a leader across any organization do in order to start showing to his population, to his market, I am being here to make sure that my market is being represented, that the population we serve is being represented within our organization? Is there something else that a leader can start doing today?
Yeah, much of this issue can be resolved by leadership. There's a great book by Kouzes and Posner called The Leadership Challenge. I went to this certification 20 years ago in Santa Cruz, California. It's based on research of the top CEOs and leaders in the country. So it's really relevant, and I appreciate what they believe out of 5 steps, what the first one is. And it's simple. It's 3 words: model the way. There is no substitute but example. Because here's what happens in a large organization. If I'm a middle manager, I look up to my next level to see how they organized their group, and I follow that. Hey, if I do what so-and-so has done, I'll be okay. No one's going to throw me out because I'm just copying what I'm seeing. So if we look up to that top executive committee and there's nobody there that looks like me, then I just copy that same thing. And so here's that system continues to, so it takes courage and a brave leader to tell their head of HR, when I have an opening in my executive committee, don't bring me somebody else that looks, and I have that opinion represented 6 times around the table already. So that notion of birds of a feather flock together is true. We all want to be perceived. Why DEI is so important, I'll leave you with this. So what's that one thing they can do? Model the way. And that's leadership. And we don't have time to explore that further, but I'll leave this with you. None of us, black, brown, or white, want to be perceived as not being progressive. DEI sounds progressive and sophisticated. So I'll repeat that. I'll repeat all the words that come with that, so people don't perceive me as backwards or a hillbilly. Because we want to be perceived that we're smart, bright, progressive, and sophisticated. So those are the words that we'll use, DEI. And don't let that be a substitute for the real work, which is how do I bring more people of different races, not diversity, equity, inclusion, because that's just ethereal and esoteric. How do I get more black and brown people in here?
Armando, I can't resist but to come in here because your answers have been fantastic. And you mentioned the importance of leadership. And I was facilitating a program earlier today, and the only non-white participant in the program made a really profound comment. And she said, for leaders to really change in this space, and she's talking about white leaders, okay? They need to truly believe this in their belly. right? And I love that simple way of saying it. There's no point in forcing a white leader to change if they don't truly believe it in their belly. What do you think about that, Armando?
Yeah, yes, and it's difficult because birds of a feather flock together. It's human nature. I'm going to hire somebody who looks like me. I see those times where, Simon, I'm not at the card game. I'm not on the golf course.
Yeah.
So culturally, that's a disconnect. And somebody that's a CEO wants to hire somebody that, hey, let's go hit a few rounds. So it takes an inspired leader.
Exactly.
And they're out there because that's the other part of leadership challenge, right? Share an inspired vision. So it takes an inspired leader to be able to have the courage to make those changes and say, please don't bring me another person. Otherwise, I'm out of touch. There's only a few ways that you can understand the market. If you don't have people over to dinner that don't look like you, then you better be spending a lot of time in focus groups and research, because you don't just get these insights that distill from heaven. You have to have a purposeful way of, how am I understanding my customer, my employees? That's really your responsibility, and you can get out of touch quickly by not looking like the rest of America. So it really takes somebody inspired. Some of this is socially right, but some of it is just for the bottom line, Simon.
Yeah.
So,
no, I agree. Perfect.
So, Armando, you gave us some really good perspectives. I mean, I absolutely agree with the, if they don't look like me, it's how do I associate with them? I think that piece of it is, and the other component that you mentioned, which is absolutely critical, was that how do you emulate the top? So pushing all the way to the top is the board of directors, right? Short of the board of directors, what would you consider is how do you initiate that conversation? Not even the change, the conversation that it should be included.
Yeah, boy, it's hard when you're not at the table. Arthur Ashe, a famous tennis player from 30 years ago, maybe longer, said, African American, said, look, I understand why Aetna insurance company wants me as a board participant. That was his way of saying, I'm Black. They want to have some diversity. I get it. But while I'm there, I will make change and I will be a voice. When you're not at the table, it's really, really challenging. So here's the responsibility now on the minorities in the company. We have to manifest as much courage as we're asking that leader, the white leader in the corner office. We have to have the courage, the conviction, the stamina, the fortitude, the patience, the persistence. And yes, there's times we put it all on the line to be that voice. There are as a few of those individuals in organizations as there are the people in the corner office that we're asking to be courageous.
That I wholeheartedly agree with that point. It's challenging, but you just kind of push forward. And
I've been there, and my duties and responsibilities as a wage earner probably would have been completed many years ago had I not done that. But I chose to be that voice, and it probably impacted the trajectory of my career. But that's who I am. I couldn't be anything else.
So let me openly endorse you to be on future boards as anyone listen to this, okay?
Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, everybody, just to interrupt, we just had a question there from Sean. I believe he's over here in Ireland. How do you guys feel about quotas, gender, minority, etc.? I'll give that one to you, Armando. What do you think about quotas?
It's a starting point, right? It's a mandate that we have to start somewhere. Many organizations today versus 15 years ago do okay in the entry level. And they point to that. When they say we believe in diversity and we have that mission statement on the wall, or the values that we believe in inclusion, diversity, equity, and inclusion in all we do, they point to, hey, well, 40% of our workforce is diverse, but it's at entry level. Then maybe at manager level, it's that executive level, that generational wealth that I speak to, because that's where the difference is. You don't get there by quota, but if somebody said, hey, if the CEO said, I've got 6 white people around the table, I want one that's a minority, well, we'll take that too.
So I would like to add to that question, the answer, because I have been the token. I actually call myself the me, myself, and I syndrome throughout corporate America. And even before corporate America, I attended an Ivy League school in the United States. And the reason why I did so well in that Ivy League school is because back then, the president of the school, Englishman, he actually said, I am going to bring to upstate New York the 20 top students from this island of Puerto Rico. And I'm bringing 20 because I'm not just bringing 1 or 2, I'm bringing their support group. And we all did so well, guys, that fast forward several years, a few decades, to tell you the truth, of the 20, 13 of us have sent our children to Cornell. And I can tell you, the 20 of us at Cornell came on full ride because we did not have the financial needs, the financial capabilities. And Cornell now is basking on the 13 of us that have sent our children to that school. So it's representation, but it's also numbers. It's not just, and numbers at higher levels. It's not just like what Armando said, 40% of the entry level. I always tell the people, what about the senior management level? What percentage? And they can't tell me. They can't. I said, it's a double digit. They can't even get out up to 1% or 2%.
It's interesting. We've just had another question from Gillian Fagan, and we might actually take this question as the premise of our next live stream, which is going to be in 2 weeks' time. And the question is, how would you recommend companies measure inclusion rather than diversity? Any quick thoughts on that, Armando? How do you measure inclusion rather than diversity?
So a couple of years ago, 2 well-known brands, it's public record, so I don't mind mentioning Prada and Gucci, that both came out with blackface products just a little over 2 years ago. It was a bad idea. Somehow it made it into production and into distribution. There was not an inclusive discussion around the table. I don't know what the diversity looked like. It could have been all people of color. I doubt that it was. But in terms of inclusion, the person who raised their hand and said, is this really a good idea? Or somebody who said, this is a bad idea, their opinion was not included. And therefore, the whole group just marched down their merry way into this prim path of roses. And it was a mistake. So whoever that voice is, black, brown, or white, many times they're overlooked. It happens at Starbucks. It happens at Burger King. It continues. So all of us who are saying, boy, this is getting better, I would probably say those people at Prada and Gucci were probably more millennial than next gens and probably no boomers on that table. So we really look towards this rising generation as colorblind, but in action, I'm still not seeing it.
This is wonderful. And just, it's been great listening to you, Armando. And I think we're getting great comments here. And what I'd like to do is encourage as many people out there to comment, and we can take your comments and we can frame our next conversations, because that's the essence of what we're trying to do here. That's why we're calling this series Inclusion Unscripted. We want to ask the hard questions. We want people to think outside the box. We want people to feel uncomfortable a little bit. And as you said, Armando, just wrapping this up, we want to see two-way courage from leaders and courage from people who aren't necessarily currently in the leadership position, because I think that's how we're going to see true inclusion. So that's the whole point of this. And Armando, thanks so much for your time. It was wonderful. And thank everybody out there. As I said, we'll be doing this every 2 weeks. So thank you, Armando. How do people connect with you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. And my email is amartin, Martin, at xledge, initial X, initial L, the word edge.com. And you're welcome to contact me on LinkedIn as well.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Armando.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.